happy to be here at Labour conference. We're showing to folks that proportional representation is a doorstep issue.
Good morning. Would you like to wipe your feet or first past the post?
I just think it could be crucial in restoring confidence in politics, and also I think that progressive voice that we have in this country.
Have I done enough of wiping my feet?
That's all good. Thank you very much, John.
We're literally cleaning up politics here, one wipe at a time.
Would you like to wipe your feet or first past the post? Oh, thank you very much. We need a new electoral... I love your trainers, by the way. They're excellent. What should we do?
It's antiquated. We should get rid of it.
There are flaws in the system, aren't there?
As someone who's only ever lived in an area where it wasn't worth my while voting, I feel this very personally.
Take out that frustration. That's all. Yeah. Amazing.
Just means that too many votes are wasted and too many voters are ignored.
We need a form of PR. We need to end this system that creates so much alienation in our wider politics.
So let's change it. Just get rid of it and bring in PR as soon as possible.
Hello everyone. I think we're here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can actually see. I was really nervous that there'd be no one there watching by the time I stopped this. It's really good to see everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the launch of PRDelivers. I'm Andy Berriman. I'm the grassroots leader for Make Votes Matter, and I'm here with my colleagues, Steve, Molly, Millicent, and Jim, and we are joined by Femi, who's going to talk with us in just a moment, and hopefully, I'm sure he will be inspiring. But before we get underway, I'm going to introduce you to Jim, who is our chair of the board, who is going to say a few words before I'll go through the agenda, and we'll get the meeting underway. So I'll pass over to Jim.
Thank you, Andy. Hello, everybody. It is an extraordinary pleasure to see so many people and so many faces. My name is Jim Williams. I'm the new chair of the board of MVM. And any of you who've been on boards or really any committees ever in your life will know that what you tend to do is just look at a lot of spreadsheets and agendas and the occasional presentation. So it is fantastic to be in a room, even a virtual room, with 201 people, so myself and 200 other people who actually do the work of making proportional representation become the future of how we run our elections in this country. So I'm really, really excited to be here. It's wonderful to meet you all. Hello, Rosalind. Greetings back to you from where I find myself at the moment, New York. So if you hear any helicopters or sirens or great kind of Hollywood movie catastrophes happening in the background, I apologize for any New York background noise. I imagine there are so many of you here for the same kind of reasons that I'm here. I imagine that a lot of you agree that an election system that deprives millions of people of a meaningful vote is just plain wrong. Hello to Dartmouth, very close connection. My family's in Totnes. So probably about 10 miles up the river. Lovely to have you here, Dave. And I think someone from Tavistock as well. Hello, Twickenham. I think, yeah, you probably all share that view. It's just simple, straightforward, the wrong thing to do to be running our elections in a way that ignores millions of people. And I imagine also you're seeing what I'm seeing, which is that we have an enormous opportunity, really a huge opportunity in the next few years. We've got three forces coming together. We have a government that we're about to have, maybe in 6 months, maybe in 10 months, but one way or another will be led by a party whose leader can be convinced to legislate for PR in the next parliament. That hasn't been the case for a very, very long time. Alongside that, after decades of steady campaigning from many of you, from many of people who were campaigners here before you, we now actually have a majority of people in this country who think that we need to reform our electoral system. That's been shown in a number of polls now. So that's enormous. Those two together would be huge as it is. Please do let Labour for New Democracy enter the waiting room. It'd be lovely to have them here. But we have a third one as well. We're about to have yet another general election that ignores millions of people's votes and puts in place a parliament that ignores and fails to represent millions of people. So you have those three forces coming together at once. And all we need to do is make sure that they collide, make sure they bang straight into each other. And if we do, we can force the hand of the Labour leadership, not just Keir Starmer, but everyone around him, to make it impossible for them to not legislate for PR in the coming parliament. That's a big thing to attempt, but it's one big, relatively simple thing. Fundamentally simple in terms of what needs to be achieved. Convince a small group of people that they've got to do something. And I know from everything that you've all achieved already, you've already been campaigning in your communities to raise the flag for PR. You've already traveled to by-elections halfway across the country. Hundreds of you descended on Parliament. And a lot of the people here who are part of the Labour Party will also have worked with our campaign, our sister campaign, Labour for New Democracy, in that historic effort to get the Labour Party to back PR as party policy. You've done enormous amounts already. Now you just need to do the next step. It's a big one. It's a difficult one. But the whole MVM team here, it's their job to help you do it. So in this session today, they'll be walking you through what you can do to force the hand of the Labour leadership. And I cannot wait to be part of it. I cannot wait to see you do it. I personally am going to be back in the UK in about 6 weeks' time. So anyone who's here from North London or anywhere near Totnes, you will find me out there with you campaigning in a few weeks' time. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all. Before handing over to Andy and Molly and Steve and Millicent and Sally and the rest of the team, I'm going to ask someone to speak to you. This is Femi, who you've seen earlier. Femi, I believe you actually wiped your feet on that same FPTP doormat. Is that right? Yeah.
I did indeed.
You did? So Femi, many of you may well know him already. He's a high-profile commentator, activist, a long-term supporter of MVM and the broader campaign for proportional representation. And part of the reason we've asked Femi here today is that there will be some people on this call who are new to activism. And then there'll be, well, all of you will know people who are on the fence about whether they should get involved, whether they should turn up to meetings like this, whether they should get out on the doorstep. And Femi's had a really kind of exciting journey into activism. So we wanted him to come along and speak about that in case you yourself were unsure whether to jump in or whether there's anyone you know who could do with a little bit of a push. So Femi, over to you.
Hi. So if you look back to about when I was 18, 19, 20, pretty much up until the age of about 23, anybody in my family, if you told them that I would be involved in politics in any kind of active way back then, they would laugh at you. I knew nothing about politics. I knew the absolute bare minimum. I did write a poem about the Iraq War when I was 12. Other than that, nothing. And that included the line, Andy's puppy with lots of hair comes in the form of Tony Blair, in reference to Bush. But I knew nothing about it. The only reason I got involved in politics was because I studied EU law, thought I could make a difference in the EU, pushing for human rights. And I studied EU law in Nottingham, in France, and I'd worked in the EU for a couple of years by the time we get to 2016. And I knew that the people who were running Brexit, both on the Leave side and the Remain side, were doing it wrong. It's that simple. I was watching David Cameron lead an absolutely terrible campaign. I was watching the lies that were coming from Nigel Farage go completely unchallenged. And because I knew from my own studies, from my own professional background, that the truth was simply not getting to people, I knew that if I didn't do something, nobody would. It was that strong sense of there is nobody at the wheel. Because, and bear in mind, in 2016, I had 20 followers on Twitter. When I really wanted to, when I got really desperate, I couldn't like call up BBC News. I couldn't speak to hundreds of thousands of followers. I had to go buy a T-shirt from Primark, and I stood in the center of the Birmingham Bull Ring with a question and I wrote EU questions, just ask. And I was just basically waiting for people to come talk to me because I knew that we couldn't count on the people that were actually in charge of things. And it's gone from that to 400,000 followers now, a column in the Independent, because, and that only happens because of the vacancy up top. It's the fact that we know that the people who are actually running this show are doing it wrong. And the more we've gone through the kind of politics that we've seen over the last few years, the more that everybody can see they're doing it wrong. And so a lot of people, especially young people, have this feeling of, oh, but no, the people that have been in this game for a long time, they know what they're doing. They'll handle it. That feeling has very much died. And so everybody is increasingly being aware that they do have the right to step in. And as for what is the scope, what is the opportunity for that? I was actually in the gym a couple of days ago, and someone, I think he was 23-year-old in the gym, and came up to me. He spotted me off TikTok, and I got to talking to him, and he was absolutely depressed. And the point where he said, "Oh my God, that makes me really, really hopeful," was when I told him about PR. I explained to him, look, if you look back at every single election since World War II, other than 1955, 1959, and 2015, the majority of votes have gone to parties that are to the left of the Tories. The majority of votes have gone to Labour, the SNP, Lib Dems, the Green. That's who we are on balance as a country. That's not a partisan issue, that's simply a matter of fact. And so if there was a voting system where everybody's vote counted equally, that would be the balance of power from now moving forward. And when he's looking at what it was, what kind of politics we're seeing now, and when he's looking at the kind of things we're seeing like today, if you paid attention to the kind of news, the things that Rishi Sunak has been coming out with, that's our unelected prime minister. That gave him a lot of hope compared to where we are now. And I think that hope is because I tied the very bureaucratic, very technical issue of electoral reform to the stuff he actually cares about. One of the most painful and hopeful things that I experienced during the Brexit campaign was after maybe 5 or 6 huge marches in London, where hundreds of thousands of us piled into Parliament, all the way down Mayfair, etc., screaming for a second referendum. The demographics that were there were, to be blunt, not young, diverse people. Yes, there was a lot of us, but nowhere near as much as I saw on the day and the week after, or a couple of days after Boris Johnson became prime minister. There was an F Boris march there, and that was the largest, the most young and diverse crowd of people I've ever seen take to the streets in the UK. It was incredible. And as a leader of a youth campaign that was pushing to get young people involved in the fight against Brexit, seeing that, I could see that Brexit was a very technical issue, which is hard to really get your head around, but they knew they hated Boris. They knew exactly what he stood for. It spoke to directly their values. They'd heard his values, and they knew that it went against everything they stand for. And that's the thing. You can't make somebody interested in something that they're not already interested in. You have to explain how the thing you want them to be interested in affects what they're interested in. So if you're talking about PR, you have to put it in terms of, hey, what is the thing that you care about the most? And when you're talking to people, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your kids, talk to their friends. What is the thing that you care about the most? If they say something like the climate crisis, which is the most likely thing you're going to get from somebody who's Gen Z, you say, well, in the 2019 election, the Tories got 44% of the vote, but ended up with 56% of the seats, which meant that on balance, Tory votes, when you compare votes to seats, were worth 21 times more than Green votes. And given the close links between the Conservative Party and the fossil fuel industry, explain to me how how we solve the climate crisis if Tory votes are worth 21 times more than Green votes. Again, it doesn't have to be partisan. This is simply a matter of fact. That is the vote share in 2019. If you're talking about issues around equality, Labour votes were worth 30% less than Tory votes. Those sorts of things. So you have to tie it to the things that the people already care about. You've seen there's an account on Twitter called Proportional Commons, where they say this is how each vote would have gone if every vote had counted equally, if the number of votes a party got actually matched up with the number of seats that they had. Those sorts of arguments will get people actually passionate about it, because it's not about the cold, hard technicalities of electoral reform. It's about making their issues actually mean something in Parliament. And in terms of how you shift that conversation on, how do you get somebody talking about it? How do you make the media listen to it? You have to put it in the most blunt and, sorry to say it, sensational terms that you possibly can. That means saying the simple fact of the UK is not a democracy. And that works for a number of reasons. One, it's factually accurate. If you in terms of depending on your definition of democracy, if you know that pretty much every election that we have, a party with only a minority of the vote gets a majority of seats in Parliament, then that means the majority of votes that went to the other parties can't actually affect policy, because the minority party has a controlling majority. So if the majority of votes have no effect on our democratic processes, then that cannot be a democracy. One would think that the majority of votes would be pretty crucial to any democracy. So making that point, convincing somebody, no, the UK is not, on balance, a democracy, will get that conversation started. It will get the media's attention. If there's lots of people suddenly saying we don't believe the UK is a democracy, that makes waves. And so I am very, very confident that when Keir Starmer becomes leader and we actually have a party in government whose members are actually on our side, because the Labour Party has voted at least once for proportional representation, that momentum, for want of a better phrase, is there. So I am very, very hopeful for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Femi. Fantastic. Really, really great to hear from you. And I think the kind of fundamental link between what we're both saying here is that getting PR to happen is about people convincing people. And you've got to connect to what it is that someone cares about. And in the case of what Andy and the team are going to present to you all now, it's fundamentally about convincing the people that Labour cannot ignore. And you are the people who are going to make it happen. So Femi, thank you very much for that. And let's hand over to Andy and the team to take us through it.
Thanks, Jim. And thanks very much again, Femi. Thanks for wiping your feet on a doormat, and thanks for making the points that you've made this evening. I will say, Femi, one of the reasons we got you on was because you can hold all this information in your head. You have lots and lots of stats. Not everyone needs to have that. And of course, if you want to find stats, have a look at our website. There's lots of information there. But later on in the meeting, Steve is going to talk about how you can talk about PR and difficult questions. And in fact, what I really do is just share the agenda. Right? I was a little bit excited at the beginning of this meeting and forgot to do just that. So you should be able to now see how the agenda looks. We've gone through the first 2 items already. Thanks once again. I'm going to talk in a little bit about PRDelivers, which is our general election campaign, and how you can get involved. And then I'm going to pass over to Steve, who's our media manager, to do just that, talk about how you can manage the media, how you can talk about PR. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions of Steve. And if you haven't already, you could be asking them in the chat. We've got Molly and Millicent who are diligently looking at the chat and copying your questions over so that Steve can answer them. And then there'll be a general Q&A at the end. So if any of the things that I talk about in the next 5-10 minutes raise questions and aren't answered, then I could certainly answer them at the end. So thanks once again to Jim and to Femi, and we'll move on now to PRDelivers. So to set a bit of a scene, first of all, we have a strategy. We have what we call a 3-pronged strategy. You can see that illustrated at the moment on the slide. So the first is to target swing seats with PR, to shape the national media narrative, and to grow the campaign. So the first one of those is targeting swing seats, and it's kind of a pertinent issue. What is a swing seat? You can see the swing seats that we've selected, the 43 swing seats that we selected on the map that's on the screen now. And the quick answer to it is they're a feature of our broken first past the post system. We're using this as a way of focusing our campaign, because if we had PR, then politicians would be campaigning across the country. They wouldn't have to focus on specific areas. It's a feature of the system that we have that focus. The circus arrives in certain areas. The media all arrive in those marginal and swing seats. So we're going to go where the politicians, the parties, and the media are going to have that focus. And the difference between a marginal seat, and we've been asked this a lot, and a swing seat, is that marginals are constantly changing. Right, then as the polls go up and down, and of course polls can be wrong, what's considered a marginal seat is going to flip-flop all over the place. And what was a marginal seat is effectively a safe seat. And the parties that want the majority, and that means getting over that halfway point of 325 constituencies that you need to get power, those parties are going to be focusing on those swing seats. We think that they're going to be seats that will always be of interest to those parties. So that is why we are targeting our campaign there. And it's our latest campaign. So it's called PRDelivers. And it's our way of targeting our resources at those swing seats, but it's also open for all MVM supporters to take part in, whether or not you're near a swing seat. All of our local groups will be involved in PRDelivers. And so we're asking for as many supporters as possible to sign up and to help deliver thousands of leaflets to voters in those areas. At 7 o'clock, you should be receiving an email that looks a bit like this. Look out for it. If you're one of the people that are interested in getting involved, then click to get involved. We're going to be following up those hand-delivered leaflets with direct mail deliveries, but the more volunteers that we can get to help, the further we're going to be able to stretch our resources. And thank you. If you are any one of you that contributed to our crowdfunder, this is the campaign putting those fantastic donations to work. Yeah, we have, this is our first leaflet. It's one of several. We have 2 more in the pipeline that will follow this. We're using the theme of Belarus. It's cutting through. Many of our supporters are already going to be familiar with this argument, but the general public aren't. Although Carol Vorderman recently referred to it, so it's starting to filter its way through to the general population. Belarus, the only other European country that shares our unequal voting system. And you can see on the reverse, we make the point in a little bit more detail, and we encourage people to sign up. But the last call to action is to make equal votes a doorstep demand. So we're asking people, when politicians come knocking, raise PR on the doorstep. And we'll follow this up, as I say, with other leaflets that may become posters and will attract attention in a different way. A perennial question that you might be asking is, what if I'm busy delivering leaflets to my own party? Some have said that they can't be involved because of that. Well, we've checked with the Electoral Commission, and we're told that for now, as long as the work is voluntary, it's entirely possible to deliver MVM leaflets at the same time as leaflets from your own party. So we're hopeful that that's going to open the campaign up to many more people who'll be able to deliver their own party leaflets as well as MVM leaflets. Big caveat with that. A huge caveat is that it must be voluntary. So we can't have paid up members doing this on paid up member time. It must be your voluntary work. And it obviously can't extend into street stalls. We can't have joint street stalls where MVM is associated with a political party, because we are a cross-party organisation. So yeah, don't go canvassing with your red, blue, yellow, green rosette on and hand out MVM leaflets as well. That is what we can't be doing. So if you live in or can travel to, and this is important because it may be that you just want to make a day trip or plan a holiday, who knows, sign up to be involved in one of those swing seats and to deliver leaflets. And yeah, the email should be getting sent in about 4 minutes. If you don't live near enough to a swing seat, we'd still like you to get involved with PRDelivers. So local groups will be delivering to their own local targets. We have Ken Lambden in Sefton, who's deciding I know there's a marginal ward up there, I'm going to deliver to that area. There'll be a different process for getting hold of those leaflets, but if you get in touch with your local group, they may well be deciding to do that. Of course, you can also get involved in the street stalls that local groups run brilliantly on a regular basis. You could run a park run. You could contact your candidates. You could definitely go to the Grassroots page. So visit our website and you'll find on the left-hand side the links that you need to have a look at our calendar, find out where the next events are happening, find out where your local group is, or get in touch with us to start up a new group. And all of that is really part of growing the campaign, which is the second part of our three-pronged strategy. We know that we need to grow. We know that we need to grow huge, as big as possible, to get PR and to get supporters anywhere they are to help with this. And that could be through staffing a street stall and signing up people to our mailing list and sharing the QR code that you can see on the screen there. It could be sharing social media posts or contributing to our crowdfunders. And yes, growing the movement is essential. So PRDelivers is aiming to do that too with the QR code on the leaflet. And there is a chance, and we're hopeful that some of those swing seat coordinators who are just coordinating leaflets at the moment might also turn into new groups. Stranger things have happened. It happened during the by-election activity that we had recently. Neil and Kate did a great job of starting a new group for Bedford and Milton Keynes there. So that's growing the campaign. And last of all is sharing the narrative. And this is the easiest thing for everyone to be involved in. So if you're not quite ready to make the step to deliver leaflets yet, you can absolutely like, share, post our social media. But if you are delivering leaflets, if you are involved in the campaign in that way, we want you to photograph. We want you to document as much as you can about what you're doing. Record that activity, show it off. We need to shape the narrative to show that there's a demand for this happening right now and in the run up to the next election. And we need to take all opportunities to draw people's attention to the campaign. We also have National Days of Action ready to plan, so keep watching your emails, and once we know an election date, we will certainly want to have the biggest day of action straight after, on the first weekend probably after an election result is known. Our next day of action is likely to be virtual, a nice simple one at first. We're going to want all the images and the social media stored up and released at the same time so that we can start getting things trended on social media, hashtag PRDelivers, that kind of thing. We're also likely to have creative events that will get the right sort of attention that you can get involved in as well. Similar to the wipe your feet on the doormat thing that you saw at the beginning. And this will always involve engaging with the public. So having those conversations. It might also involve door knocking. And you'll find that once people start talking about how the system is broken, they find it hard to stop, like I am right now. Steve Gilmore, our media manager, will be talking about that in just a moment. So he's going to talk about how you might have those difficult conversations or those convincing conversations to get people on board. And meanwhile, our staff are going to continue the work of building relationships with high-profile supporters like Femi and politicians from all parties to build the alliance we need to take our message from the streets and the doorsteps to the corridors of power. So please, if you haven't already, take that step, get involved, sign up to deliver, join your local group. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Gilmore.
Andy, and evening everybody. As Andy said, if you haven't already, please do get your questions in. I am trying to work out my answers to them as they come in. My colleagues are very helpfully enabling me to do that as well. So please do get them in. Anything about difficult conversations you've had when trying to discuss PR, pitfalls you've encountered or avoided, things like that. But just very briefly, next slide, if you wouldn't mind, Andy. And again, a few scene setters for this brief segment. I recall seeing a really interesting polling presentation from Sir John Curtis back in the autumn. And we haven't the time to get into the nitty gritty, but what it showed were the two key moments that really shifted the dial politically. One was Partygate, The other was Liz Truss's fiscal event or mini budget. That's probably not a surprise to most of the people on this call. Trust in politics was already low, and then it plummeted, and as we know, it's still on its knees. But crucially, additional polling and focus groups have demonstrated that on top of this, there is a pronounced lack of faith in the ability of among voters. There is a lack of faith in the ability of politics to deliver for people. And that's especially so among Labour's target voter segments. And I won't get into exactly what those are, but you're going to have to take my word for that. But this gives us something to work with. So the IPPR, next slide, Andy, the IPPR think tank ran a survey experiment last year to assess the effectiveness of 4 different approaches to sort of framing democratic reform. So it was a bit broader than electoral reform, but I think the findings broadly hold for us too. And you can see the 4 different frames that they established. And as those of you who are also on a call where I did something similar to this about half a year ago will know, delivery was the one that resonated quite comfortably the most. In other words, how can democratic, for us, electoral reform help to bring about improvements to the things that I care most about? So it's an instrumental argument rather than an intrinsic one. And that brings me on to some of the strategy that I hope we can work on through the course of this year and in the general election, both on a sort of macro media level and also locally talking to everyday people having normal conversations. And that is trying to weave discussion of our failed electoral system into the key thematic battles that will dominate the forthcoming election. So this is easy for MVM to do because as a all-party, a cross-party organization, we can't take positions on these issues. But what we can do is say that from cost of living to immigration, whatever we think about the particular policies being offered, what we can agree on is that we need to demonstrate how first past the post has exacerbated those problems by incentivizing short-term tactics rather than long-term strategy. And by doing so, we aim to position PR as a vehicle for a stable politics that can actually deal with these issues and thus embed genuine, meaningful, long-term reform that people can perceive. It's not about trying to oversell PR or be disingenuous, but it is about trying to offer an idea of the consequences of PR on a practical day-to-day level beyond the intrinsic arguments that resonate with all of us on the call, I'm sure, about fairness, a lack of representation, feeling that politics doesn't hear our voice and doesn't necessarily work for the majority of people. So it's taking that next step to make an instrumental argument. On which note, and I'm going to now switch to the document with all your questions in, if I can find it. Here we go. So I've seen, there was quite a bit of discussion early on about the effect of extreme parties. And I'm confident that that's something that a lot of us on the doorstep will have encountered. And specifically the question about the instance in Spain of Vox coming to prominence. The particularities of Spain's voting system to one side, what I would say is this. When answering this question, or others like it, try to focus on the current problem. And somebody very helpfully did this in the chat just after and said, we already have an extreme government. First past the post is no guarantee that you're not going to get small parties becoming the kingmakers. And then if it's specifically about extremists, I think the crucial point is probably this one. To govern is to choose. And because in a proportional system seats match votes, the sheer weight of votes in the middle will mean that if the extremists want to govern, they will have to choose compromise and consensus. So it's the moderating influence of PR. But ideally, we never actually have to get to that stage. This is a conversation where we're losing. Really, we want to keep the conversation on the areas where we win. And that's things like pointing to the failure of the current system to adequately deliver good government, whether that's because the Conservative Party is vociferous and falling apart, or because it's elected on a minority of the vote and people do not feel like it's speaking to them. So that's just one sort of example of a way you might go about trying to answer that question. Let me see, what else have we got? And yeah, don't get bogged down in discussions about PR voting systems, Peter says in the chat. Again, spot on. If we're not going to fall into our opponent's traps, then it's trying not to. I can see Femi's got his hand up. I'll come to you just a moment, fear not. But yeah, we really don't want to get into a conversation about the complications of voting systems and how it might change. It's really about how the current system is failing to deliver and how PR might end up taking us there. Just one further answer that I will offer. Something intrinsically British about first past the post. That's a nice idea. The idea that it's those Europeans, and Femi was talking about Brexit earlier and possibly can come to this as well. But the idea that there's something fundamentally and intrinsically British about first past the post. One could very well argue that there is something intrinsically British about variants of PR as well, since some of them were conceived in Britain and some of the first implementations of them were also in Britain. There's absolutely nothing intrinsic about first past the post, and I would recommend reading a piece written by one of our activists, Michael Bursell, on this very point. Femi, you had your hand up.
Just to say that it's further than simply saying that first past the post is no guarantee that you don't have extreme parties in power. I'd argue strongly that first past the post is one of the reasons why we have extreme parties in power, because the electorate is effectively constantly forced into a choice between two binary opposites. The two-party system means that people don't really have any say on what those two parties choose to do. They can, between themselves, decide to go in whatever direction they want, whether they want to go in the extreme right direction or the extreme left direction. Right now, lots of traditional conservative voters are absolutely horrified with the direction that the Conservative Party has gone. Similarly, on the other side, there are people that were centre left who didn't like the direction that Corbyn was taking things. And there are lots of people right now that aren't happy and feel completely underrepresented because of how centrist Keir Starmer is being. If you want to get the politics to actually reflect the people, you have to get towards PR.
So says the gentleman who will be making this case live and in person. I have the luxury of being able to write it in advance. So I chapeau, sir. I take my hat off to you. Just a couple of quick answers to questions that have come in, and then I will hand back to Andy because I'm conscious of time. Does MVM support any particular version of PR? No, with the caveat that we do endorse the Good Systems Agreement, which sets out a series of tests for what we regard as an acceptable system. But that does not necessarily limit it to a particular variant like STV, mixed member, or the additional member system, party list. We don't take a position on those. They have to meet this series of criteria. I would say on that point that in Wales at the moment, some of you may know that there's a process to adopt a particular form of list PR. And while broadly speaking, some of the reforms are positive on that particular issue, we have been urging for a more accountable form of list system. That's to say a flexible or an open list system. So that gives you an idea of where we might position ourselves on that kind of issue. Apologies if this has been asked already. What is the ideal answer to someone saying we already had a referendum about that? No, we didn't. Alternative vote is not PR. is the slightly curt answer. The longer answer is that was over a decade ago. A lot has happened in politics since then. If anything, the political system has further crumbled. That does not invalidate asking the question again. But I think it's important to note that AV and PR are not the same. If anything, that's a choice between the two most similar forms of electoral system you could possibly conceive. Surely we have to be able to articulate our preferred PR option when asked. No, I would say we need to try and keep the focus on the failure of the current system, where it's not incumbent on us to have all the answers and be the ones that are the burden of proof isn't on us, I think, is the way we need to try and think of this. The burden of proof needs to be on those defending the current broken system, rather than putting us in the position where we're the ones on the back foot. Again, pivoting back to the failure of the current system, that's where we can make headway. I'm going to stop there. I could go on. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And if you have a burning question you really want to talk to me or someone at the team about, please get in touch. My email is media@makevotes.org.uk, so you can reach me there. Andy.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you for fielding all of those questions. And thanks, Femi, for your intervention as well. We have some time at the end now to field any questions really about PRDelivers, because as you can probably see from the chat, we can talk endlessly about different systems and different approaches, but really the evening is well, you've just had the guidance from Steve about that, and you've had the responses to some of those questions. But now, if there are any questions about PRDelivers, I'm very happy to answer them. One thing that was asked in the chat was whether or not we could share the list of swing seats, and I think that Sally has posted that into the chat already, so you should be able to see that if you scroll up. Yeah, the last thing that Stephen Gosling asked, will there be a list of target seats? Yes, absolutely. And you can also get that if you look at your email. Just below the button that says sign up here, there should be a link to the PDF. That's what the PDF looks like. And you should be able to click on the map at the top. There's a link to take you to the map, and you can scroll through and find out exactly where those swing seats are. Or you can zoom in, and it's a little bit more convenient. So that answers that question practically. I'll ask my team, Molly or Millicent or anybody else, have you fielded any questions that are specific to PRDelivers in the chat? Is there anything logistically that I can answer? Yes, Millicent.
You've already answered the ones that have come in.
Okay, then I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think we're going to bring the meeting to a close, because that's it. Thank you so much for your time again, everyone. Thank you, Steve, for all the great advice. Jim, would you like to say a couple of words before we finish?
No, I just think it would be really good after all this information we've given everyone to wrap up with just a quick reminder of exactly what it is that we're encouraging them to do.
Great. Okay, so if you can check your email once you leave this call, there should be an invitation for you to sign up to be a leaflet deliverer. If you are somebody that would like to coordinate, those emails have already gone out, but if you're in a swing seat and you feel that you're able to coordinate, there's an option to indicate that as well inside the sign up form. But we're really looking for as many people to join coordinators and to deliver leaflets. So if you can sign up and let us know which swing seat you're willing to either travel to or live in, then please do that straight after this call. If you're not close enough to a swing seat or don't think you can visit, then please do go to the Make Votes Matters website and look for your local group. Get in touch with your local group, or get in touch with us if there isn't a group that's local enough to you. We want to expand, so we're going to want to start new groups in all sorts of different places in order to make this campaign sing and get our message heard as much as possible. And I think that's it. Sue's got her hand up. Sue Ledwith. I will just ask you to unmute Sue. Sue from MVM Oxford.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much. Some very interesting material, etc. We don't have one of your target seats in Oxfordshire, but there's work going on in terms of some of the Oxfordshire seats. But actually, I wanted to ask Jim, right at the beginning, Jim, you said we're going to force the Labour leadership to take on PR. I want to know what you mean by that, please.
Yep, no trouble. So I responded to your message, but
Did
I
you?
think it's
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it.
okay. No, not at all. I think it's a good opportunity to be able to speak about that a little bit. Essentially, I'm sure you will agree with me that political parties exist to do two things: change the world and keep themselves in power. And hopefully those two things should be the same for any political parties that we support. So the way to force a political party to do something is to make it necessary for them to stay in power, for them to do a certain thing. So we can see already that a majority of people want to reform first past the post. If we can show them that a majority of people in the target seats they rely on want to change the electoral system, then they'll be scared of continuing to give those swing seats as much power as they do today. And they will understand that actually, if they spread that power more evenly, then they won't be held hostage by all of those wonderful people who want proportional representation.
Forced by the power of argument, Sue.
Well, yes, I'm a Labour Party member, and Annalisa Dodds, the chair of the party, I ask her a question about PR every month at our meetings, and I would get the fence sitting. But anyway, it's yes, we have to keep trying.
I realize there's one more hand up, but if I can just say one more thing back to that, I think it's really important to know that there's a whole range of organizations who are working on this. MVM is really the activist organization. We work very closely with a number of others, including Labour for New Democracy, and I think there's some people from them on this call who do a lot of the internal Labour advocacy, and the Electoral Reform Society, who do a lot of the research and the public campaigning. What we can bring alongside our partner organizations like this is a demonstration of the amount of momentum that this cause has. We've now got a majority of people for the first time. I think this happened last year for the first time in decades. That momentum is enormous. And as the activist campaign for proportional representation, we can make a lot of noise in a way that the research-focused ERS can't. And we can make a lot of noise across multiple parties and across the non-political public in a way that our colleagues in Labour for New Democracy cannot. So it's not going to be about us alone convincing those people and enforcing them, but it's about the role that we can all play. And it fundamentally comes down to all of us convincing the people that we know, but especially the people that Labour cannot ignore, that we need to have PR. Thank you for the question, Sue. And I'll stop talking because I know that there's another couple of questions.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, we have.
I just wanted to add to that.
Sorry, Femi. Yes.
In terms of convincing Keir Starmer to change position, it's about making sure if we can get to the point where he can't get through a single interview without somebody asking, Mr. Starmer, why do you believe the majority of British votes shouldn't count? That make it politically toxic for him to keep supporting first past the post. If that question gets asked on a regular basis, so much progress gets made.
Steve, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to say, absolutely agree with Femi. I think that's one major part of the equation. The other is also, and that's maybe what I was speaking to, is that's raising the stakes of not doing it, and then there's lowering the stakes of doing it. And I think we need to be doing both of those things. You probably can't do both of those things simultaneously, but across the movement, we need to be doing both of those things. And that's why I think this delivery frame is helpful, because in some respects, we can sell that to politicians as look, this will help you deliver the things that you're promising voters and make your life easier.
Thank you, Steve. Before we go on to the next question, to answer a question in the chat from Catherine, the WhatsApp link for MVM Filton and Bradley Stoke doesn't seem to work. Will we be contacting you another way? Yes, your email will be used, so there'll be another way for you to get in touch. It may be our end or your end for the WhatsApp group, but there are ways around this. So please look at your email box, and we will absolutely forward that to the coordinator in that area. So happy to say that my phone is buzzing because the 43 WhatsApp groups I've set up on it are starting to get filled up with lots of volunteers all about to join the campaign. So please join them, absolutely. Right, we've probably got enough time to take these 4 questions, but we'll see. Jeff, you were first, I believe. Yes. And you muted? Oh, I need to unmute you. Yeah, there you go. You should be able to unmute now. There you go.
Yeah, hello. My name is Jeff. I'm a member of the Bristol group. We're campaigning at the moment of a by-election that is going on in Kingswood, and we've had a street stall already last week. We have another one on Saturday. But one of the questions that came up was about which system and all the rest of it. So actually, it occurred to me that in the end, I think what needs to happen is for us not to actually push for a referendum about PR. What we need is to persuade, and it has to happen this way, is to persuade the Labour Party to get on board with PR and make a commitment in their election manifesto during their first term of a government to actually bring in PR. The argument about which system perhaps will obviously be had before that within the Labour Party and by people feeding into that. But I think the problem with the referendum, we saw what happened with Cameron's referendum. I know it wasn't PR, but that doesn't matter in the minds of most people. A lot of people said, well, 2 people said to me on Saturday, well, we had a vote about it. We had a referendum on it. People don't want it. And the reason that people don't want it is because they were not given all the information, and also because a lot of people, quite frankly, let's face it, they just regard it as a turn-off. People like to stick with what they know. And I think, therefore, a political party, if it's in government and committed to PR, it should just bring it in its first term, get it done, because otherwise this could drag on for decades more. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. I'm sure we all agree. And there is a consensus within the democracy sector, and absolutely MVM, no need for a referendum. There is no need for a referendum to make this change. And the referendum that happened in 2010 was for the alternative vote, which was not proportional. This is a frequently asked question that you can reply to with that response.
Sorry, Andy, can I just say, is that MVM's view then? Is that MVM's view that we should not have a referendum?
Absolutely, yes. Steve, did you want to contribute to that as well?
I didn't know that.
I wouldn't have put it quite so
emphatically,
perhaps. But broadly speaking,
my personal choice.
The argument is this, that there is no constitutional reason, there is no requirement for a referendum, there is no settled convention on how these questions are answered. Some, it is true, suggest a referendum, but that has not been the case for many changes, and most recently, given it will likely be forces, not entirely, but broadly on the right that make this argument in some cases. The Elections Act brought in a whole series of changes, including changes to the electoral system in various elections, and that was not passed. It did not require a referendum, it was passed as a simple act of parliament. So yeah, slightly longer. I wouldn't say, if we ultimately get there, bring it on, but there's no need for it constitutionally, I think is the point.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to have these responses out there, isn't it? People are adding them to the chat now as well. We cannot resist absolutely making the point. And yes, I was far too emphatic. A referendum, I tell you what, would be better than first past the post, quite frankly. So, Andy, hello, Andy from Yorkshire. Good to see you. Yes, you should be able to unmute now.
Can. Very good. I'm not sure whether this is a question for the MVM leadership or we mentioned there are some Labour for New Democracy, Labour for Electoral Reform people on here. I did attend a Labour for New Electoral Reform briefing recently, and they have a very different map as to what they think are swing seats than the one that MVM's come up with. And given that we've said on this call that we're working together, I just wondered how that comes together and why it doesn't overlap. I'm not too bothered about the technicalities of why it doesn't overlap, but how we're making sure we work together and not going off in different directions.
Thanks, Andy. I attended that meeting as well. I think that their map was based on where PPCs that are supportive of PR are based. I think it was a small number of areas. Am I right? That's what you're referring to, Andy. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it was a smaller number than we've got. Yeah, than MVM's got. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we work with all sorts of organisations, but we all deal with things in slightly different ways, and I think that's definitely Labour for New Democracy's remit, and our remit is to appeal to the wider electorate. So yeah, we work together, and I'm sure that there will be synergies along the way in much the same way as there was with Sort the System, yeah.
Well. Anyway, the PPC for Keithley is going to the MVM stall on Saturday, so it was one of the L4ER target football. So
good stuff. A plug for the West Yorkshire stall there, is it?
Yes. It's the Ilkley subgroup of West Yorkshire who are taking themselves off to Keithley on Saturday. So
brilliant.
Anybody in the vicinity of Keithley, especially anybody from L4ER, would be very welcome.
Absolutely. York and West Yorkshire expanding into their own thing up in the north of the country and doing fantastic work. Thank you, Andy. Good to see you.
Cheers.
And I think we can take one more question from Sean. Hello, Sean. Good to see you again. You should be able to unmute now.
Oh, right. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's another question relating to the Labour Party. I'm not a member of the Labour Party, but obviously they're key to the whole business. So I understand that Labour for New Democracy are organising canvassing for PR sessions where they're trying to maximise the number of pro-PR Labour PPCs who are elected. Now, I just wonder whether there's any sharing of intelligence between MVM and Labour for a New Democracy in terms of identifying existing PPCs and new PPCs who are selected, who are committed to a change in the electoral system. Are we actually updating our information on this on a regular basis? And can that be shared with local groups in terms of we can actually target resources to lobbying PPCs who have yet to be persuaded?
That's a great question. And it's not part of PRDelivers, so I'm going to pass it on to another member of the team to answer. Who would like?
I can probably speak to that, Andy.
Go for it, Jim. Yes.
I sit in the conversations between MVM and Labour for New Democracy, Sean. So first up, I would say if you live in a constituency where both organisations are active, please take part in both. Absolutely. Land has a real focus on convincing Labour Party prospective parliamentary candidates, or PPCs, as you say, to explicitly endorse PR. That's brilliant. We really, really support that approach. Our set of swing seats are the ones that are perennially swing seats. They're likely to be really important this election and any future election that comes up. So there is going to be overlap there. And we're working with Labour for New Democracy on what kind of activities we should add on top of PRDelivers to be able to build even closer cooperation. So not ruled out, not ruled in, but something that we're actively working on. And for now, step one is really, really build up that capability of all of our local groups to be getting those leaflets out. Because if we're doing that, then we can do a better job in future also of doing activities like the one you mentioned.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, it's just gone 7:30, so look at that amazing timing. We've gone over an hour. Thank you once again to our guests and to all of you and to everyone that's already started to sign up. Thanks for all your comments and questions, and thanks for the team for answering. I'm going to put it to a close now. I'm going to stop recording, and give us a wave, everyone, please. Give us a wave. I think definitely waving goodbye is a good thing to do. All right, thank you.